Hello, everyone. Folk flooding through the door.
It's nice to see a few familiar names coming through. It's always, yeah, it just makes you feel a little bit, I don't know, got friends in the room, which is nice, right?
Always
People
nice to
that
have friends.
the people that we don't know are friends we haven't met. What's the saying? Friends we haven't met yet, or something. I don't know what the saying is.
Something like that. Right. Okay. I think we've got a good turnout. We'll no doubt get a few straddlers join over the next few minutes, but let's crack on in the interest of time. Can't wait to get into this conversation. So thank you all for joining our latest webinar, and this promises to be a really candid, enlightening and very personal conversation about ADHD. I'm delighted today to be joined by two brilliant professionals, both of whom happen to be neurodivergent. So for those of you that have been on our webinars before, Emma will need no introductions, but I will. Emma Bridger is my co-founder at the EX Space and founder of People Lab. So many of you will already know Em. And also joined by the awesome Dan Hudson. Dan has a grand title of Chief of Capability at the equally grand and awesome company Rolls-Royce here in the Midlands. And he's a vocal supporter of both visible and invisible diversity. I'll ask them both to introduce themselves properly in a moment, but that's just a heads up. Today's webinar marks the end of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which, if you're anything like me, you'll have seen a lot more about neurodiversity this week in the press and across the media. And it's really shone the spotlight on this important topic, what it means to be neurodivergent, and the enormous value neurodivergent people bring to both organisations and society. A few really quick statistics just to bring this to life. So it's estimated that up to 20% of the global population is neurodivergent. That's 1 in 5 of us. So this is very much a mainstream thing. Yet, despite this, research published recently by Harvard Business Review suggests unemployment rates are as high as 80% for neurodiverse people, much, much higher than the general population. And indeed, here in the UK, only 31%, these are the latest figures, of neurodivergent people are actually employed. So the untapped talent pool is absolutely immense. And we know now from diversity generally, but a wealth of research, that organizations that embrace neurodiversity have amazing benefits. You know, studies have shown that supporting neurodiverse employees can boost the team's productivity by 30%, and that organizations that cultivate an inclusive environment for neurodivergent employees have reported 28% higher revenue, 30% greater profit margins. These are big numbers. So we know the difference this can make. And we know that neurodivergent people have amazing and very tightly honed skills in areas like pattern recognition, attention to detail, creative problem solving. So this is something we've all got to embrace a lot more. So I'm really delighted to get into the conversation now. I understand really what it's like to be diagnosed with ADHD. How does that impact, in particular, your experience of work? What's it like to work with an ADHD diagnosis? So those questions are the heart of the conversation. Let's, without further ado, let me hand over to Emma. If you can introduce yourselves far better than I would, and let's get on the couch and get the conversation started.
Thanks, Lee, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think I have posted about this a couple of times that I'm quite nervous about today, and anyone that knows me knows that I've been doing this for so long. I don't really feel the nerves anymore, being 54 years old and speaking and being on stage for most of my adult life. But this feels like, you know, being quite vulnerable really, and being honest about some stuff that I've probably never really talked about in a work domain before. So feeling a little bit anxious about it, but it'll be fine. It's my brain overthinking it. But I'm not going to do any more intro on myself, Lee, because I just want to get stuck into the conversation. So I really wanted to do something to sort of mark this week. A lot of you may know that my whole family is actually neurodiverse, as we know now. And I did a webinar with my husband and son a few years ago, who are both, well, my son's autistic and my husband is autistic and ADHD. And it was one of our most popular ever webinars, and people really appreciate, I think, just a really honest conversation around this stuff. So thought let's do one this week, and I'm going to talk about my kind of experience of late diagnosis of ADHD. And I really wanted to get Dan on the call with me because Dan and I met a couple of months ago now. Dan came to a webinar that I was on, and we had a chat afterwards about possibly doing some stuff together. And we had a really wonderful conversation. As anyone who is ADHD will know, when you kind of get with other people that are ADHD, just the energy goes up and you just sparking off each other and vibing off each other. And it kind of came out, didn't it, Dan, that we were both ADHD, and we just kind of went off and we had a big chat about it. Anyway, so I thought it'd be great to get Dan on today. So welcome, Dan. And I'm going to ask you, Dan, to sort of tell us a bit about yourself. And I really want to know about that wonderful image behind you to get us started.
No, so well, first of all, Emma, thank you very much for inviting me for the chat. I'm really looking forward to it. Um, I've had a bit of an odd career, I think it's fair to say. So, um, I'm born and bred from Derby. Um, at 18, I decided to join the military on a whim. Um, went to a career centre with a friend with no aspiration of being in the Royal Navy and joined and signed the dotted line. He didn't bother. He left me and abandoned me. Um, could call that impulsive. Um, spent the best part of 12 years in the Royal Navy because people bet against me. So they said, no, you're not going to be able to do this. So I tried to prove them wrong. Um, left the Royal Navy and then joined Rolls-Royce as a project manager. Never done project management before in my life. And then progressed to where I am now, which is Chief of Capability, but I've done a lot of stuff in between. Um, the background is me playing with AI. So this is my AI artwork where I put in, can you draw an ADHD brain as a landscape? What would it look like? So there's like a sort of brain stem tree sort of thing in the middle there. But I find it really relaxing. For a lot of people, it looks chaotic, but for me, it's calming. And I think it really sums up some of the stuff that goes on in my head most of the time. If we manage to stick to a single train of thought during the conversation, Emma, I am going to be absolutely floored, by the way. So
Please
those those are not neurodivergent. I'm going to make no apologies. You're on for a bit of a roller coaster if we start. Is it lily padding,
Yeah,
Emma?
yeah.
Yeah. So please hold on tight.
Yeah, no, I think I shared with Dan that my husband, I don't think he made it up. He got it from somewhere, but he talked about this idea of lily padding, and it was like one of the light bulb moments in my head. Like, because both of us, people who are ADHD, tend to jump around the conversation, and even if you're doing it, it's doing someone else's head in, maybe or not. As the case maybe with us, we're fine with it, but it's just nice to be able to explain it and give it a term. People kind of get it then. Um. So thank you for that. And I think just straight away, I'm just smiling about your popped into the careers office and then joined the military just like that. It's just, yeah, that's I'm not surprised by that, shall we say. Tell us about, because we got talking about our kind of late diagnosis. So tell us your story of kind of realizing that you, by the way, we're doing it now. I'm doing it now. Interestingly, I prefer to say I am ADHD rather than I have ADHD. What's your preference? Because when I say I have it, it makes it sound like it's an illness, and I don't like that. Do you prefer I am ADHD, or I've not thought about it?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if I am or I have. It's probably at times I've loved to hate it. Um, and I've loved to hate it all my life, but not realised I've loved to hate it, which is the late diagnosis piece. Um, for me, one of the things I've heard quite a lot of people saying, there is positive attributes to it. There
Mm,
is things that I have an ability to take what I see as very, very simple problems that are absolutely multifaceted and complicated, and they've got many variables, and I can work it out in my head.
mm,
But if you speak to me after this conversation and ask me what I said, I will have no recollection.
mm,
Um, so for me, I think I've got to a point where I own it. I'm not
mm.
it doesn't own me.
Yeah.
So, so I try not to label it too much. I do. I do try and bring it up in conversation and when I can. And I forgot what, see, short-term memory. I forgot what the original question was, Emma.
It's all good. It's all good. Your story of your kind of late diagnosis, how did it happen? How did it come about?
So again, because I thought it would be interesting, I decided to do an MBA. Because I sat in a position, I felt like an imposter in the role that I was in because everyone around me is very, very smart. I'm blessed with working with some of the most intelligent people in the world. And you've got some guy that's come from the Royal Navy that had a part degree in aeronautical engineering, working with professors and doctors in very, very clever subjects. So I decided to do an MBA, and a lot of it was all right. But my academic writing, God, it was awful. I would get words mixed up. So the natural conclusion was I need help. I need a bit more time. I need a bit more tolerance in terms of my academic writing. So I thought I was dyslexic.
Mm.
I had a 5-minute conversation with a healthcare professional and they said, "You're not dyslexic. There's a little bit more going on here." We then went through the route and the trial and tribulation of getting diagnosed, ended up having to go private, never did get through titration, so never did manage medication through the NHS. That's a different webinar. We won't go there. This is trying to be upbeat and positive about it.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things, once I sort of had that label of, okay, ADHD and comorbidities of dyslexia, high anxiety, it's like, oh, hang on a minute here. That makes a lot of sense with some of the stuff. And I call it my baggage. Some of the baggage I'd carried around with me for such a long time.
Mm. Yeah, I hear you. I think it's fascinating. I mean, really resonating with my youngest son. He was recommended to be tested for dyslexia. And they came back and said, no, it's not dyslexic. And we haven't formally tested the ADHD bit because I don't think we need to at the moment. And it's actually it's 1,500 quid plus to go private. And it's obvious. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So that really resonates. And
What was your journey, Emma? Was it similar to Dan's in terms of that initial diagnosis?
Yeah, in that I still feel like I've got an imposter syndrome there because I don't have an official diagnosis. However, I am a psychologist. So I do know how to, and I have had unofficial diagnosis from other psychologist friends who they do this for a living, right? So there's no doubt. But again, the kind of the imposter syndrome you talked about, I kind of need that piece of paper to prove to people, even though I use what's called the ACE Plus and the DSM kind of stuff myself, and then went to a good friend of mine who is that's what she does for a living. And she said, yep, you absolutely are. And she did it as a freebie. But I still feel like I need to prove to people because people just think I'm jumping on what's trendy right now. And I don't think that at all. But but I have a bit of shame with mine. Not shame about being ADHD at all, but shame that I didn't spot it. I'm like, I'm a psychologist. How can I not notice? And I pride myself on being quite emotionally intelligent and self-aware. And that was like quite a big kind of thing to get my head around that I'd missed it. And it was actually a conversation with a friend of mine a few years ago, having lunch, and her daughter was going through diagnosis, and she said it's made me think that I might be. She said, of course you are. And I went, what? She said, well, you're obviously. And I was like, what? And I wasn't offended by it. And I thought, I don't know. And I never thought about it. And of course, because I'm ADHD, I went home and researched it to bejesus. I won't swear today. This isn't quite authentic Emma, because authentic Emma would swear there, but I'm being professional. And everything I started reading was like, oh, okay. And then at first I sort of thought, oh, but it's really easy. You say things like, oh, I'm often late. Well, I'm late and I'm not neurodiverse. But then when you put all the different pieces together, I'm probably a bit like yourself, Dan, so much of my past made sense. And even one of the biggest ones for me was I've lifelong suffered with that of anxiety. And as a psychologist, I've searched long and hard for the answer to this. And I'm adamant that it wasn't a chemical thing, although, there are chemicals involved, of course, but I'd had no trauma. And it never really made sense to me, the anxiety. And I was anxious even as a tiny kid, right? I remember one of my first memories of anything good happening, I would find some reason to be anxious about something. So I remember really clearly being a really young primary school age, and Summer holidays would come along and I'd be like, great, summer holidays. My brain would go, yeah, but you haven't taken those library books back, have you? Because ADHD people are, I'm generalizing here, me personally, really rubbish at like taking library books back and stuff like that. And then I go, oh, I'm gonna be in trouble. And what if I go to jail and I catastrophize about it? So even as a young kid, I'd go to this place like worrying about stuff. And the anxiety got worse as I got older, and then it manifested in panic attacks. And I just was always really, it was a puzzle to solve. I couldn't solve this bloody puzzle of like, why? I have this most blessed, privileged life. There's no reason for this anxiety, this fight or flight that I'm in all the time. And for me, that was the biggest light bulb moment. Like, now I know why. So yeah, bit of a waffle rambling journey there, but you know.
Go on,
Quick
Emma.
question from Claire, Emma. What were there any other telltale signs or symptoms that led you to your diagnosis, or in your case, your recognition?
Well, looking back on it, it was absolutely blindingly obvious. But I don't think I would have ever put the pieces together unless someone had said you're ADHD. And then literally like so many parts of my life, and I'll share the stories a bit later on because there's lots of very funny stories, probably like yourself, Dan. But I think the most one of the funniest, but with a good ending, was when I fell pregnant with Harry, my oldest son, and I've been very casually seeing Ted, my husband, now husband, the happy ending, for like a couple of months, and he'd moved to North Wales, and because he was sick of Brighton where we were living, and we weren't long term. And I went to stay with him for a weekend thinking, I don't even know why I'm going to stay with him, there's no future in this. Anyway, I felt pregnant, decided to have Harry, which was the right choice for me. I'm absolutely pro-choice, but that was the right choice for me. And when it came to have Harry, I still didn't even really know Ted that well, right? We've been dating, we had not even together a year when I had Harry. And I said, look, I've got to have maternity leave off. So why don't I come and live with you in Wales and we'll see how we get on, right? And looking back on it, that's something that I think you'd have to be pretty neurodiverse to make those decisions. And I had friends and family in Brighton, they were going, you are crazy, what are you doing? So I'm just going to pretend I'm on holiday and I'll get my head around it. Because he lives by the sea. So and he was living in a caravan at the time on his sister's farm. And it's quite funny looking back on it. So he kind of rented this little house like near Llandudno. And in my brain, I didn't know anybody. I had no friends, no family, barely knew Ted. And I went and had a baby with this guy and got my head around it by telling myself, I'm on holiday, it's fine. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So sorry, Dan, you were going to say something before.
Yeah, go on. It sort of links into it because it's interesting. The narratives you have to create for yourself to actually justify your own actions. I growing up, I had a persona that I was always the life and the soul of the party. Dan was always funny. He was always happy. I was miserable and really, really depressed as a child. The anxiety that you're talking about before, Emma, that was my childhood. I hated everything. I would constantly worry about every single conversation I had with everybody, and I'll overplay it in my head. Recently, well, I say recently, a couple of years ago, I apologized to a friend of mine for an action I took that he has no recollection of because I've been worried about it for so long.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm gonna have to apologize to him now. I've finally plucked up. He was like, what the hell are you talking about, Dan? And then I replayed almost minute by minute what happened. He was like, how do you remember that? But it's just the masking and actually trying to fit in.
Yeah.
It's I think, and to onto the anxiety piece, that's what led to a lot of my anxiety. This constant having to put up a persona and trying to be somebody that I wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well with the late diagnosis and me not spotting it, I think even though I am a psychologist, this isn't my area of expertise. I'm not clinical. I did health psychology and then more latterly work psychology. But I think there has been until recently a real stereotype of ADHD. It's that kind of naughty kid, usually a boy, can't sit still, cliff jumping. And I didn't relate to that at all. And I really love the stuff that Alex Partridge is putting out there. As you can imagine, I follow about 200 people that are experts or share stories on this now. But he talks a lot, and that's kind of irony because he's a guy, but I really love the way he just talks a lot about how ADHD shows up in women, and that kind of inattentive is, obviously men have that as well, but that kind of the the attention deficit is well, not, it's not attention deficit, because we can be really attentive to things, but the kind of it's internalized more than externalized. So I'm not running around, racing around, but my brain is all the time, it's spinning a million plates and it doesn't switch off, and it's overthinking everything. So I think there's been much more awareness around different types of ADHD, moving away from that stereotype, and also how it shows in women. And as you say, women are pretty good at masking, and there is some research behind this, and men do it as well, of course. But you know, I was very well behaved at school, because I couldn't bear the thought of pissing people off, and I was people please. So I was actually very well behaved at school, obviously worrying about everything internally, but you know, what if I don't pass my exams because I need to get the hell out of this kind of place that I grew up in? No offense, Lee, because Lee lives in that part of the world, but I need to like spread my wings. So there you go. I'm already like worrying about upsetting somebody with a comment. So yeah, so I think that the masking thing for me, and also the anxiety, because I've read lots of stuff, Dan, I don't know if you think about this, about, oh, you know, the anxiety comes from all the kind of criticisms, but I don't know if mine does. I think my brain is just hardwired to be in fight or flight all the time. There's a lot of criticism as well, but it doesn't help. But I don't know about, you got any thoughts on the anxiety side of things?
So it's interesting because during the pandemic, I completely shut off from life. I couldn't put my mask up. I couldn't separate work life from home life. So I always had the commute into work where I can stop pretending to be dad
Yeah.
and go into work and pretend to be Dan, the person at work. And then when the pandemic came, the shutters came and it was all merged into one big mess.
Mhm.
And I was walking, I was having walking meetings, and I was walking about 15, 16 miles a day. And what made it worse is everyone said, Dan, you're a real inspiration. You're getting through this pandemic. We all should be like you. And I was screaming and crying on the inside. Um, and it got, you know, it was quite painful for me because of getting all these compliments of, Dan, this is, you know, we should all be doing this. People mirroring my behavior. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? I'm falling apart. So I got help, didn't take any time off because I don't.
Mm.
Um, got cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, you got a bout of imposter syndrome, you know. Is it imposter syndrome, or was it rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Similar sort of thing, but it's
Very.
that
Yeah.
that fear of being rejected by my peers, my colleagues, by my family. It was really painful, but I'll be honest with you, that was probably the point where I started reflecting on myself. And if I didn't have that horrible, horrible situation, I probably wouldn't have got the diagnosis that I got in the end.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your honesty there. Really appreciate that. And I think just talking about these things is just so helpful, that we're having these sorts of conversations. And I think it's quite a few points I want to pick up on in there. But before we talk about the superpowers, the great side of this, let's talk about the challenges. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And again, that was something that really resonated with me when I started reading around that, because again, well, it's very typical of anyone with ADHD, and I really felt that applied to me. It's something I've really struggled with all my life, going, why am I so sensitive to rejection? Because again, I've been brought up by the most wonderful parents who are still together. Who, my dad told me when I was a young girl, Emmy, you can do anything you want in life, and he used to say, apart from maybe lift heavy things, but there wasn't a reason for it. It's like there's no trauma. Why am I like this? And that again was just so helpful for me to understand that, and understand my kind of, and I was self-aware enough, I think, studying psychology and doing this with my career, to know that my reactions were often like not what they should be. But yeah, over kind of whelming people pleasing kind of side from me. And even like running the business now, being rejected, a proposal being rejected, it actually hurts me. And it's ridiculous. And then rationally, I know it's like, just get over it. It's not you. They haven't got any budget, or they want to, it's fine. But it's like, it's really hard to kind of come to terms with that. So I think that's kind of quite a good area to bring up. How do you deal with that now? Did the CBT help with some of that?
So there's a reason. There's a very. If I had the picture, I'll show you. I look very different to what I did back then. So before then, I was clean shaven, grade 2, back and sides, neatly cut hair. Um, and I looked like everybody else, and I fitted in with everybody else. I didn't stand out. That was the turning point where I sort of took ownership of my own identity. If people are going to judge me, they can judge me on my terms, not the terms that I think they're making up in their head. And I call it mental credits. It's how I want to exhaust my mental credits. I can spend all my mental credits worrying about what people are thinking about me, or I can do something and I've now set a condition where they're judging me on my terms. So I don't need to worry about it anymore. I could put that to the side. So got a lip piercing, grew my hair. My hair's quite nice and long. It's in a man bun at the moment. I've got my beard. And for me, I am comfortable with that. That's my identity. That's how I am comfortable. If people don't like it, well, it's their problem, not mine. So judge me on my terms. And I think that was really important. That was quite liberating for me.
I love that. I love that idea of mental credits. That's a really great way to look at it. It's something that really bouncing around a little bit. But when we talked first, something I think that we both really kind of bonded over was the fact that both of us had done well on paper in a corporate career, and yet neither of us felt that we ever fitted into the corporate world. And I feel like a fish out of water. And again, that's always confused me. Like, I'm so not a corporate person.
Mm.
I used to be in a rock and roll band, and I started off in the academic sector, which is probably far more suited to someone like me. And yet I work for big corporates, and I work with big corporates now, and it's like obviously different now because it's much more self-selecting because I work for myself. But I was always kind of confused by the fact that I felt like the kind of company wanted a bit of me, but kind of couldn't really get the head around me. So it'd always be like, hero to zero, back to hero, back to zero, depending on who was in charge and who I was working with. And they loved my energy and the way I did things. It's like, oh my God, you're amazing. Or like, no, I'm going to shut you down. I actually had one boss I worked for tell me in a public sector that in a public place, I really irritated her and did a head in. So, and I know you've had a similar kind of, we kind of talked about that, didn't we? That sort of work piece.
Yeah, it's an odd one because, and again, one of my strengths is that, as I was talking about it before, these complex problems, these multifaceted, these different, and I've had recent managers tell me the reason why they've employed me is my different thinking. I can bring a different perspective that's just completely and utterly unique to what other people will see, um, which is great. But for me, it's more a case of it. It's hard to fathom that what I see as simple, everyone's like, "Wow, how did you do that?" Well, it's obvious. It's like this 6 million lines joined together to make this really abstract picture. Can you not see it? It's
Yeah.
obvious to me.
Yeah.
And I think one of the realizations I've probably had over the last year is I go far too quickly. I'm jumping to the end of the road, and people are still taking their first steps, and they need to go on that journey with me.
Yeah.
And taking the time, and actually, for me, it goes then back into the mental credits and why I have to fill up mental credit. That's exhausting. Slowing down when I want to just get to the end point is really, really tiresome. And repeating myself and having the same and engaging with people, it's really hard. So I have to find balance in my work life of, and again, very simple trick that I've done. I have a maximum of 4 hours of meetings in a day where I'm sat there. I've got to sit still.
Mm.
Ken, challenge. You've already probably seen me fidgeting about, rocking about on my chair because I like to. Um, Squirrel on Red Bull. Um,
Yeah.
but I think for me, making sure that I plan my diary such that I can do the stuff that energizes me, having conversations like this is a freebie for me. This is great. I love these sort of conversations. Having conversations about people. I have naturally quite empathetic, and I think it's because I see a lot of weak signals that people don't see. It's
Mm.
linked into observation. It's overwhelming at times,
Mm.
but actually I could pick up on a load of weak signals and moods in rooms and stuff like that.
Mm.
But for me, spending time with people is the most fascinating thing in the world. The
Yeah.
complexity, the problems, it's exactly what I love to do. So I energize my diary in that way and I balance myself in my work life in that sense. And then I've got kickboxing, yoga, I've decided that I'm going to learn the guitar from scratch. Never played it. I hyper focused over the last few days. I've spent about 8 hours in 3 days playing a guitar from scratch, and then become a perfectionist about chord changes and calluses on my fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar. Yeah, that all really resonates. I think it's great to share some sort of strategies. And like yourself, I mean, I got really lucky when I was in my last in-house corporate job. I had this brilliant lady called Penny Wallace who coached me, fantastic coach. And she really helped me to understand my strengths and to play to them. And as you say, thing about any area of neurodiversity is it manifests in very different ways. It's not kind of a one size fits all, but I'd realized that I got bored really easily. So my superpower, if you like, in the world of work was when I was fresh into something, that clarity of vision that I had, things looked, I could just see, I think, well, am I missing something? Because it's really obvious to me what's going on here. And I'm sure they must have thought of this. I had that kind of ability just to have like real clarity. And as you say, to problem solve and to just make something quite complex, quite straightforward.
Yeah.
I'd be really energized going in somewhere new and getting everything sorted and started. And, then within 18 months, I'd be bored and want to move on. And in a big corporate, you can do that. Like when I worked for EDF, I went and did different jobs and different things. And I did a bit as a market owner for the energy care sector, and then went back into internal comms, did some engagement, and it kept me busy. But when I worked with Penny, what she made me realize is that actually that would be incredibly helpful if I was set up on my own. Because you get a project, you go in, you solve problems, and then you back out of there. You don't have time to get bored. And I was like, wow, this could really work for me. And again, being ADHD, as I understand now, I thought, yeah, I'm just going to set up my own business, even though I've got 3 kids to support and my husband doesn't work. He's at home, he's being mum. And it seemed perfectly reasonable. And to be fair, he's always supported me, and he's always kind of like, yeah, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? Well, if we have to live in a caravan for a bit, we've done it before, it'd be fine. Which is a great attitude to have. I think when you're both in that way, it makes it a lot less stressful than if I'd had a neurotypical partner who'd be like, what are you doing? I've got a mortgage to pay. I had like literally about 3 months worth of, we could live for about 3 months when I started the business. Looking back on it, I'm like, what was I thinking? No idea if it would work or not. But I think for me, that's one of the, talking about the strengths, understanding for me at work, how I could use my strengths and be energized, to your point. So yeah, I think that's some great ideas in there.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about partners. So my wife is neurotypical, and it frustrates the bejesus out of her when me and my son are standing toe to toe. It's like rock meek, immovable object. 2 ADHD people in an argument, one trying to be parent, one trying to be adolescent teenager. Neither given an inch. It's really, really frustrating for her to watch because both of us are in the wrong. I'm over-egging at one end, he's being stubborn in the other end, and we're so similar. But when we have that argument and that tension, it's so hard for us to either of us to back off and get out of that moment. So I think one of the biggest things that I've done talks like this at work. So I run what we call an inclusion cafe.
Mm.
And one of the things that's really important to me is just the conversation.
Mm.
Because everybody is, you can take ADHD, you can take autism, you can take a raft of invisible and visible diversity
Yeah.
traits, and it's fine. Have the conversation. It's not taboo to talk to people. It's, I, I mean, again, this is me. I saw a question flick up. I've sped read it, and I'm trying to answer a question which had popped up. I think, to be honest with you, the best thing you can ever do is just be open and honest with people about, have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Are you aware of this? It becomes, the more it's socialized, the more normal it becomes, the less of the less people have this anxiety about talking about it, the more you can actually play to the strengths.
Mm. Yeah.
The one thing that is fundamentally true in industry now is the problems we're trying to deal with are probably some of the biggest, most complex problems the world has ever faced.
Mm.
in multiple, you know, we're not talking about simple problems anymore. We're talking about multifaceted, complex geopolitical situations that change things every day. That's where you need diversity in teams, be it neurodiverse, be it gender diversity, be it pick it whatever metric you want. The more diverse your team, the more successful you've got, because you need the brightest brains and different perspectives to solve them. So for me, that's where having that ability to openly talk about this means that you can actively put the right people in the teams to solve these problems.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Lee, we've got a few questions popping in, haven't we? So I'm mindful, want to get to some
Yeah,
questions.
there's a great conversation going on the chat as well. Some really interesting reflections as well as questions. There was a theme emerging around. We've touched on it slightly, but maybe go into it a little bit deeper. What do you need from kind of co-workers, bosses, colleagues to enable you to really thrive at work? How can we best support you? We've touched on sort of variety of job, the kind of appreciation and understanding bit, but what else on a practical level would help?
So for me, I've got reasonable adjustments that I've agreed with my workplace. So we have an open office. It is an absolute nightmare for me if I'm in an open office and there's loads of conversations, because guess what I'm doing? I'm listening to 30 conversations at the same time, whilst trying to do an email, whilst trying to write a presentation, whilst trying to deal with the person who's standing next to me talking to me. So I try to balance it. If I've got something that I need to really focus on, I will work from home. So there's adjustments you can ask for in terms of being diagnosed and stuff like that. But actually, it's the norm now. The pandemic changed the world anyway. So working from home's a norm. I think explaining to people, please, if you see me deeply, intensively do not tap me on my shoulder and ask me a question, because as soon as that thread of thought is gone, that's it. I'm never getting it back. Or I'll
When
get
you're
it back.
in the zone, let you
Yeah.
be in the zone. Yeah.
Hyper focus is a great ability when I can channel my hyper focus into, and I think, Emma, you summed it up brilliantly. If something's engaging for me, I will forget to eat, I'll forget to sleep, I will throw myself 100% at it forever and a day. But if the minute somebody says, "Oh, can I just have 5 minutes?" People pleasing, I'll say, "Yeah, sure." Stop, and then completely lose where I was. So they're the
Yeah.
two for me. What about yourself, Emma?
Well, I'm really lucky because I run my own business. So I've set it up in a way that works for me. So happy days, really. I mean, it's interesting. I'm always fascinated by the minute people have to pay for your time to be in a meeting. Guess what? Most of those meetings aren't really relevant, or you're not needed at them anyway, which I think is fascinating. It's a whole other webinar on that. So I mean, like, yes, I have meetings, and I mean, I have a tendency to burn out. So I get into something, and I'll be, oh, you know, I have massive time blindness. So I underestimate massively how long things will take to do, but then I work really quickly. So, and that's both inside and outside of work. I mean, even last night I was going to the theatre with a friend, and I had half an hour before I had to leave. My husband was giving me a lift. He said, "You need to go and get ready." No, I've got half an hour yet. Yeah, but you know how long it takes you to get ready? It doesn't take me long to get ready. I was like, "Oh, it doesn't take me long to get ready." I start emptying the dishwasher. I'll just do this before I go. And then I'm like, because I don't, for some reason, my ADHD, it's like, I don't want to do the thing I'm supposed to be doing, whatever that is, right? So if I'm supposed to be writing a book, which I'm at the moment, guess what? I'm happy with a Hoover, but I'm supposed to be hoovering. I'll rather write a book. It's almost like it's kind of like, you know, petulant child in me. I don't know what it is. So I have massive time blindness. So I have to be careful not to burn out. I need a deadline to prompt me to work, but I have to be careful not to burn out. And I've learned some tricks over the years around my diary. Rather than going, "Oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine," people pleasing, I'll go, "No, I'm gonna struggle if I've got that many." Say, like, I mean, I did it last week actually. It did burn me out. I had 3 days of full-on delivery back to back, and I'm still recovering from that because it was intense. But that doesn't happen very often now. So managing my diary. I get to it the hours I want. I'm not a morning person, so I tend to start a bit later. I'll often be working in the evenings. I start to come alive from about 4 o'clock. Really, I'm like getting really into something, and I've got to go. It's better for me now the kids are older, because when they're younger, I felt like, of course, I want to go home and spend time with them. I love my kids, love spending time with them. But now, two of them at university, and one's kind of getting ready for GCSE. So if I'm into something at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock and I want to go on, keep going on, I can. It's not the end of the world. So I really like that. So, and my colleagues all kind of know how to work with me. They're used to the typos that come with every email and text that you get from me, the lack of detail, because it's boring to have to read stuff. AI is brilliant for that sort of thing. So I'm lucky that I've been able to make the adjustments for myself. But when I was in house, I think it was, going where playing to your strengths, really. So really being really honest about, and I'm a positive psychologist as well as sort of traditional psychology, and that's really where my passion is. And learning about positive psychology with the best in the world, I'm never going to be great at proofreading or using a spreadsheet. So why try to get me to be good at that stuff? Surely turn up my strengths, because then you're going to get the most out of me. And a lot of organizations that we work with, they really get that kind of strength-based approach. I think that's a great way of speaking to your colleagues about, look, I'm really good at this stuff, so give me more of that to do, rather than making me do something that's going to make me want to lose the will to live. So
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I will procrastinate for days on something that will take me 10 minutes.
absolutely.
I've polished shoes over doing a piece of work, which was a 5-10 minute piece of work.
Yeah.
Because it just does not engage my brain. And I think I really, what you're saying, Emma, I'm completely on board with. And I'm slightly jealous, by the way, that you can do that. I think for me, just trying to find that almost trick myself into, Dan, if you do this, you can go and do that. And I know
Yes.
you really want to go and do that.
Yeah.
So putting it in my diary that I've got to do this before I can move to the next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a kind of like a little bit of a gamification thing before that was even. No, I'm exactly the same. I'm like, I will reward myself with whatever it is if I get this thing done. And I really like, don't do it as much now, but it's kind of coming back again, like train journeys, because I'm like, right, I've got an hour and a half before I get to London. If I do this thing, then I'm allowed to listen to my music or read my book. But I can't do that until I've done this thing. And that really works for me to make me do it. So there's the sort of tricks that I use, but that kind of short burst of energy with things that only take a short burst of energy really work with me. But when you get hyper focused on something, like I said, I'm writing a book at the moment with Lee, and I actually, it's the first time I've enjoyed writing a book, because I didn't enjoy the last. I mean, I love the fact I did it, and I love the output, but the actual process I didn't enjoy. Whereas I'm actually really enjoying writing this one. I don't know. I'm trying to work out what's different, but anyway, yeah. So that I get kind of stuck into that, and I come up for air and it's like 8 hours later and I'm like, well, where's the day gone? So
Yeah. Just picking on something you said before, because sleep's really interesting to me. Do you find if you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain switches on, that's it, you're up now, that you're not sleeping again?
Well, this is where I'm not very typical of ADHD, because I always joke that the greatest gift I have, my greatest gift, or the gift that God gave you, whatever way you want to look at it, is the ability to sleep. And I've always been really good at sleeping. I don't necessarily need as much as other people. And I don't know if it's it's the narrative I've always told myself, like I can sleep. And so I've always been able to sleep. So I don't really have that. But if on the rare occasion, like this morning, I woke up couple of hours before the alarm, and I was like, right, I'll just get up because I can't go back to sleep then. So so I don't have that so much. Is sleep a problem for you?
Well, I can always tell when I'm at. So you talked about burnout. I can always tell when I'm edging close to burnout, because in the middle of the night my brain will trigger something, or I'll get disturbed. A thought will come into my head. I won't be able to let it go. So prime example, I was up at 1:30 this morning. I've not slept since 1:30 this morning.
Bless you.
No, but it's fine, because I will survive to the point of very limited sleep, and then all of a sudden it'll be like a sledgehammer comes down, and I have to sleep. But it's one of these things that. So I got up early this morning, 4 o'clock this morning. I was walking my dogs, and actually the exercise thing, and actually being able to go and do and having that space. Open space is really, really important. I incorporate this into work. So I try to encourage people to have walking meetings and stuff like that, because open space is that freedom. It's not the noise, it's the fresh air, it's
Yeah.
the energy, the endorphins and all that sort of stuff. That helps me sort of calm the brain down. So look, calm down. It's not a big problem. let's work through it, and step by step it sorts it out. But yeah.
No, I totally get that. I mean, as you know, I live in Hastings, and it's something for me about being by the sea and that open kind of vista. And
Yeah.
it's interesting you talked about freedom. That's such a big thing for me. I feel so panicked at the thought of ever being not able to escape or shut. I get quite claustrophobic. Even if I go, part of my panic attacks when I first started having them, if I was in any kind of space, I would be really panicky about, can I get out of here? And now I understand why, fight or flight, etc. Even to the point of like go to the cinema, I'd have to check out where the exits were, and I could feel my heart going. There's something in me that has this real need. And looking back to kind of the evolutionary psychological aspect of this, why this people with ADHDs were kind of selected to survive was because it was really helpful for hunter-gatherers. We were like, yeah, come on, let's go. What's over there? Let's go and find out. We like that space and that adventure. And we needed that, and I still have that really strongly. And if I ever feel even like silly things, like my husband's got a Land Rover Defender up really high, and I love being up high in a car. I can see the world, and it's got in to be repaired at the moment. And we've got this Audi, I think it is. It's really low down, and I feel really boxed in. And every time I get in, I feel quite anxious. I feel like I'm closed in. It's quite a physical thing for me, So I think there's something about freedom and space that really resonates from what you said there.
No, so I will never sit in a bar or a pub or open space without having my back to the wall. I need to be able to scan the horizon and know everything that's going on at any given time. And one of my friends once questioned me on this, and much to their dismay, I was able to point out all the couples who was on a first date, who was having an argument, a bit of a rocky patch, because I picked all these signals I picked up sitting in a bar. It's great if you want to write a soap opera, because I could be making notes as I'm going along and taking quotes and stuff. But
People
it's
watching.
it's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting. Simple things like being social are absolutely exhausting sometimes.
Yeah, but I say I love it. I love being social because I love
Oh
meeting
yeah.
people, having chats. And I had one of my really good friends sort of slightly took the piss out of me recently, but it was a little bit of a kind of, I don't know if it's criticism or not, but they talked about my kind of flavor of the month with people. I was like, well, it's not that. It's just I'm really interested in meeting new people. I like to talk and hear about them, hear their stories, and but that can be seen again, the kind of problems with relationships. People can see that as like, well, if you want new friends, that must mean you don't. It's like, no, it's not an either or. I can still have my old friends, but I like meeting new people.
I'd see that for me is again, I will forget. I'll get this real bad guilt cycle with friends where they'll message me. I don't reply within a week. I then feel guilty that I've not replied in a week, so I won't reply anymore because the shame's kicked in. And then it'll go on and on and on. And all of a sudden, we'll bump into each other, and it's like I'll pick up a conversation like we saw each other yesterday, because in
Yeah.
my head that's how
Oh,
it's
yeah.
worked.
Object permanence piece. I'm the same. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Lee, I'm just conscious
Absolutely.
of time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Got
Yeah,
more
me too.
questions.
I'm keeping one eye on the chat as you're talking, which is absolutely fascinating. And I think there's people out there like you, Emma, that are kind of self-diagnosed with this. There's others like you, Dan, that have got a formal diagnosis, and then there's an awful lot of people that suspect that this might be something that they have. What would your advice be to someone who does suspect that? Where do you begin? Do you chase that formal diagnosis or not?
Dan, you'll have some views on this, but I think that it's tricky because the NHS is just, it's not in a great place at the moment in terms of
Yeah, someone mentioned a 8-year waiting list for it.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's why. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been diagnosed formally. I just haven't paid for it and had it rubber stamped, and I was lucky to have that. But it's a tough one because the private route costs. It's not an insignificant amount. So, Dan, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the advice I've given people in the past. So I needed a rubber stamped version of the diagnosis um, to give
Yeah,
to the university to get reasonable adjustments in
yeah,
my assignments. Okay. Everybody sits on this neurological spectrum. Some people are more onto one side than the other, but all of us are on this same weird and wonderful thing. So the question I would always ask myself is, So if you've got a positive diagnosis, what are you going to do with it? Is it affecting your life that you need to go through titration and you need medical help? Great. Then keep at it.
Mm,
Look at how you support that. If it's because you need somebody to confirm it, well, what are you going to do with that? You can own your own identity.
yeah.
So for me, it's about really being clear with your own head. Is it because, I'm going to say I'm ADHD, I'm not diagnosed, everyone's going to doubt me. It's a shame spiral. People don't think like that. Normal people don't think like that at all. In fact, people would actually be saying, yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
The amount of people that turned around to me and said, I thought you already knew, Dan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for me, it's all about, I know why would people would want it and why it's that understanding and forgiveness, but own it anyway. If you
Yeah.
think you are, own it anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's really good advice. And I'm kind of on the fence about going through titration, which is I will have to get the formal diagnosis for lots of different reasons I won't bore people with. But yeah, my husband is very anti, that's his view. He's like, this is you, own it, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And he's like, you won't be you if you haven't got this side to you. And I respect his opinion, but the thought of just calming down some of that noise is so tempting for me, and just seeing how it would feel. And I'm very open about this. I was taking Manjaro, which is like Ozempic. I started last July and I'm just coming off it now, and that really helped calm down the food noise, because there's no doubt in my head that the overeating for me was a reward dopamine hit as part of being ADHD. And it's not, people can say it's an excuse, whatever, but I'm owning it. And just having the experience of not having food noise, it's been amazing. And I'm just thinking, it made me question whether, made me think seriously about whether going on to or trying titration, just to see how it feels for me, because I think I'm a little bit more curious. I don't need to kind of go, no, it's not for me. So I'm still kind of in that space of like umming and ahhing about it. So that's where I'm at. But I think it's really good advice. And if I'd known when I was doing my academic studies, and won't surprise to hear I've done 3 master's degrees in my time, and a postgrad diploma in coaching, not because I'm clever, but because I'm an ADHD nerd. I think that would have really helped with my studies if I'd had formal diagnosis, just to give me the bit of space and time I needed. That would have been really helpful as well. So not just about the meds, but about and the reasonable adjustments at work as well. I think a lot of workplaces probably would ask for official diagnosis, right? I don't know what
Yeah.
Rolls-Royce do, but they probably would expect that. So again, that could be really helpful there. So
Yeah. So I'm gonna sort of go with the super ADHD nerd. So um in the space of 2 weeks, I did a 24-hour kickboxing charity event, flew out to America for the first time, and wrote my dissertation on the plane. That
yeah,
and by the way, having had 8 months to write a dissertation, I chose to use 2 weeks because I couldn't be bothered to get round to writing a dissertation. I enjoyed doing the research and the reading and everything else. That was great fun, but actually sitting down, putting pen to paper. So I completely and utterly get the free master's hammer. I
yeah,
do get it.
That's
yeah.
incredible.
Oh, it's
That's
so funny,
incredible.
isn't it? I like when I was doing, sorry, swapping stories now, when I was doing my MBA, just a quick one before we finish. I After my second year, I couldn't do the exams because I was having Harry. So I was actually having given birth, so I couldn't do the exams. And but I wanted to do them. So I did the resits. It wasn't a resit for me, it was the first time I'd done it in the September. Harry was like maybe 3 months old. And I had to go down. I was living in Wales at the time on my pretend holiday with Ted and Harry. Had to drive down to Brighton because I didn't at Brighton Uni, stay in like a travel lodge, breastfeed Harry during the night, and then I had to have special permission to go out and actually pump my breast during the exam, and so to come with me because I wanted to sit the bloody exam. And it looked back, why did I just not put it off for years? Because I wanted to do it, just
Yeah.
what were you on? I was still kind of like, he was like, yeah, I think he was about 8 weeks old or something. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And look back and things like that. I mean, it made me laugh. I think it's quite funny. It's good, funny stories. So, Lee, I'm going to hand over to you to sort of
Fantastic.
new
You know what?
question.
I'm going to ask one cheeky last question, if I may, to both of you, which is to finish on a high, and we'll go back to kind of superpowers. So, what is the one kind of capability or power that you've got that you think's deeply rooted in ADHD that elevates you at work? What what is that one thing, if you could pick one thing?
Well, I could pick about 6, but I for me, because I tune into people very quickly. Conversation with them is really easy because I can tune into people and bounce off people really easy. It sort of shows us a high level of empathy. And actually, people are the most valuable commodity that businesses have. So if you're a leader with high levels of empathy and investing in people, it's a really good strength in a leadership role.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think I'd add to that, and we've already mentioned this, that the ability to kind of problem solve and not be phased by really big complex problems. And actually I get really energized by that. I'm like, nothing better than when I've got like this kind of giant jigsaw puzzle in my head, and it's quite a visual thing for me. I'm kind of putting all the pieces together, and it's quite a creative process. And it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then I get to that moment when I've solved it, and it feels really good. So I think for me, there's that, and also I think I have, overplayed as a weakness, but I'm not really frightened by stuff. So I think I'm happy to give things a go and fail, and I don't need to. Yeah, so I've done some quite crazy things in my corporate world time and with clients as well that have paid off, because I'm like, well, what's the worst that can happen, And I think that's and I don't think I really appreciated that strength until more recently, that kind of ability to go, it's fine, and being calm in a crisis as well. People are, I mean, freaking out about stuff, and I get it, because it's like it's your job and everything, but I'm like, it's okay, no one's died here. It's all right.
I love that calm in the crisis, because it resonates really with me. But then, heaven forbid, I forgot my work pass again. It's the worst thing ever. Small things, I am terrible.
Absolutely. I get heart in my mouth. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. We're literally coming up to the hour now. Thank you for everyone who dialed in. I hope we covered most of the questions as we went. There's some great conversation going on over there. Lots of people multitasking on this, which is wonderful to see. So thank you, Dan. Brilliant. Thank you so much for being a guest on this. Emma, thank you for being in the guest seat for a change.
Oh, it's weird.
Be great to have you both. Fantastic, enlightening conversation, and a really fitting end to this week of celebration around neurodiversity. So thank you both so much.
Yeah, I just want to say massive thanks to Dan as well for a great conversation. Like we could probably carry on for hours, right, Dan? But other people got stuff.
I've got time. Got time, Emma. Let's just keep on going until Monday.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll
cheers, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.